of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference. Hello to everybody. My task is supposed to be today to tell you something about the benefits of NATO membership. And I will not talk to you about the benefits for Montenegro to be in NATO, but I will tell you why for Slovenia was important to be a NATO member and what are our feeling after 10 years of membership of Slovenia in NATO. Now, maybe experience of Slovenia are somehow interesting for Montenegro, having in mind that we share a part of our culture, history, that we understand each other, that there's a very good chemistry between Slovenian and Montenegrin people, and in that respect, maybe it's interesting for Montenegro what Slovenia has to say about NATO and what are our experiences. Now, it took us 10 years to become a NATO member. From the first day when the government decided that this is the principal orientation, took us 10 years, and we became in 2004 a NATO member. Before deciding about the NATO membership, there was extensive dialogue, something that looks like it is now going on in Montenegro, open dialogue, a lot of confrontation of different opinion. We based our dialogue on different options. We said objective is to make a good security for Slovenia, because this would influence the overall political, economical, and social development of the country. So what are the options? And the options were to build your own army, to rely on EU membership to get protection from EU when we became a EU member, to ask neighbor country which you trust to provide security for you, or to be neutral, or to be a NATO member. Now, after playing with all these options, we find out that neutrality was not real option for Slovenia, because nobody would recognize it at that time and at that place. Building own army was simply too expensive. For comparison, I can tell you now that Austria spends, as a neutral country, spends 2 times as much money on per soldier as Slovenia, comparing to GDP. And Switzerland spent 5 times per soldier of GDP as Slovenia. And Slovenia is NATO member, and Switzerland and Austria are neutral. Of course, neutrality is a comfortable position, but you should have historical and political reasons for that, and you should have money, because neutrality costs a lot. You should build your own army. As a neutral country, nobody protects you. You should protect yourself. So neutrality, no matter how attractive it was simply not option for Slovenia. At that time, we couldn't identify any country in the neighborhood who we would be ready to trust and ask them to protect ourselves. Maybe now the situation is different, but at that time that was not the case. We find out that membership in EU does not provide you with the security which we were looking for. And this is still the case also now. So in the end, it came to the option of NATO membership, and we got a referendum for that. We were one of 3 countries who was running referendum for NATO membership. Positive response was 66%. And after 10 years, I can say we have a very good feeling about NATO membership. Why? We feel very safe as a NATO member. Our armed forces are technologically modernized, and they act according to high NATO standards. and they are specialized. We almost don't have Air Force in real terms. We have very limited Navy, but we are specializing in some parts of armed forces which neighboring countries are not. So in that respect, we are very good. Secondly, we have now smaller armed forces and more efficient armed forces. So less and more as a NATO member. On a long term, we save money on armed forces. It's cheaper to maintain and build your armed forces as a NATO member because you specialize than as a non-NATO member. Next, we are NATO beneficiary of NATO investment financial sources. Each country should contribute to NATO investment fund, but in case of Slovenia, we get more from that fund than we put into their fund. So it's economical benefits. Not mentioning the whole idea that membership in NATO is a sort of guarantee that the country is safe and stable for foreign investors. As a NATO member, you enter into a group of the countries which is making decisions. You are not anymore in the group of the countries where somebody else is deciding about you. You get more exposure in geopolitical matters, and you get more exposures in European matters. Many times Montenegrin friends are asking me, okay, that's very nice, but what's the bad story about NATO membership? And I cannot talk about bad stories. I would talk about obligations. Membership means also obligations, starting with a membership fee, starting with participation in a different actions of NATO, and these kind of things. But all this comparing to, these are all good news comparing of other options which we used to have on table before. Our membership fee to NATO amounts to about 4 million euro per year. And depends, the membership depends on GDP of country. For instance, Croatia pays about 2 million euro per year, and there's some initial calculations for Montenegro which amount to about 500,000 per year. It will be more in first year of membership, and it's less in the next years of membership. That's the story of Slovenia. I think that if this is something which is also information or source of thinking for Montenegro, I would be happy, but I would say that Slovenia NATO membership is a success story. If you would ask Slovenians now, what do they think about NATO membership, you would got about 50% in favor and 50% neutral or not in favor. But I believe this is quite a common situation. But actually nobody asked this question because this is fact, and we don't even make analysis of this. This is just preliminary sort of assessment, what would be the response of the people if you would ask them. But we simply cannot imagine ourselves and our security without being a NATO member. One more thing, which might be also applicable for Montenegro, namely, we were ready for NATO membership in 1997. We were at about readiness as you are right now. which means we basically fulfilled the standards, but we didn't get the invitation. It has nothing to do with readiness of Slovenia, but it was because of some political global reasons why Slovenia at that time was not invited. It came as a huge shock to us because government, this was for our government the highest priority. There was a lot of dialogue going on within the society about the NATO, and on the end there was no invitation. Initial shock was very bad. People asked us, what did we do wrong? What's wrong with Slovenia? Why we don't deserve it? But it was nothing to do with Slovenia. We were simply in the package of the country which was not ready, and so the entire package for. Nevertheless, we kept up that momentum until 2004 when there was a referendum. There was very important and decisive event which pushed the number for positive number for referendum. Actually, this was the assassination of Serbian Prime Minister Djindjic. It came as a shock to us because before it looks that things are settling down in Balkans, but then suddenly Djindjic, who was very popular in Slovenia as a modern, progressive politician, he was killed in Belgrade, and Belgrade is not so far from Ljubljana. So it came as a sort of wake-up call, and that pushed up the numbers. And the second reason why the numbers was high is the support of the church. This is not that much applicable for Montenegro, but in case of Slovenia, Church understood that as a NATO member, Slovenia would become a more democratic country, and Church would be able to get back the properties which were confiscated from them during the communist time. In fact, we became NATO member, and Church got back that properties. It's another story what they did with that properties. That's not so good story, but okay. So that was one important issue in Slovenia. Of course, there was also a lot of hesitation. There were people who were saying that Slovenia will become will be full of NATO bases, NATO soldiers, and so on, and our tourism will go down, and all these sorts of things. But this was just propaganda which never realized. There was never idea to have a base in Slovenia, the same as the situation is Montenegro, and there's no basis. So that's the story of NATO. If I may say a few words also about EU, because the parallel process went in Slovenia the same as in Montenegro, EU membership. We became EU member and NATO member in May 2004, the same time. How do we feel about EU now? For Slovenians, when you first ask them about how do they feel about EU, their initial response are in three sectors. First is free movement. You can travel however you want in EU, nobody checks your passport. You can find a job in EU wherever you want, and you can study in EU whenever you want. That's very visible and strong impression. About 41% of Slovenians put this into the first place. Free employment in EU is also important during the crisis time, which we are facing now. The second point that they mention, 33% of people, is euro. But you already have euro. You got euro before us. The third point is that there are no borders. That's very visual, and they're very impressive. The border posts of Slovenia with EU member neighbors don't anymore exist. There's a speed limitation on the road to 60 kilometers per hour, where before was the border post. So that's very visible and that's very positive. Of course, we benefited great from EU financial support. We are NATO benefiter of EU sources. We make a great contribution, Andrea mentioned, to our infrastructure sector and to agriculture sector with EU funds. And so we are a happy and satisfied member of EU, not mentioning that there's about 300 Slovenians working now in different EU institutions. So I think this is a good story. So both parallel stories, NATO and EU, and they were both the top priority for Slovenia, are for us positive stories.